Do you remember the way your grandmother's kitchen smelled on a cold morning? Not a candle, not a spray, something real, something that had been going since before you woke up. If you do, then what I'm about to share isn't going to feel like history. It's going to feel like coming home. And if somewhere along the way you find yourself missing a person who isn't here anymore, well, that just means they did their job right. I'm Marie, and today we're going back into that kitchen together. 25 secrets. 25 things. Grandma knew that most people have completely forgotten. Some of them will save you money. Some of them will make your food taste better than anything you've bought in a store. And at least one of them, I promise you, is going to stop you cold. Because you're going to remember standing right there, watching it happen, never thinking to ask why. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the things she did every single morning before anyone else was awake. Secret number 1, she saved everything, and she started with the water. When Grandma boiled potatoes, she didn't pour that water down the drain. She set it aside. Cloudy, starchy, still warm, she'd use it to thicken gravies, to start soups, sometimes just to add body to a sauce that needed a little help. She knew something we've lost in the age of instant everything, that the water you cook in is already carrying flavor. Pasta water, potato water, the liquid left in the pot after you've steamed vegetables, all of it had a second life in her kitchen. Nothing left that stove without giving everything it had. Secret number 2, the heel of bread was never thrown away. I don't know when we started tossing the ends of the loaf, but Grandma would have looked at you sideways for doing it. Those heels went into a paper bag on the counter, and when the bag was full enough, she'd run them through a grater or crumble them by hand and keep the crumbs in a jar. Breadcrumbs for meatloaf, breadcrumbs for topping a casserole, breadcrumbs pressed into a pork chop before it hit the skillet. She could stretch one loaf of bread into 3 meals without trying very hard. Secret number 3, she knew exactly what to do with a ham bone. The ham bone didn't go in the trash after Easter dinner. It went into the freezer, wrapped in wax paper, sometimes in a bread bag tied at the top, and on the first cold Monday of the following month out it came, into a pot with dried beans she'd soaked overnight, navy beans most often, or Great Northern, some onion, a bay leaf, salt and pepper. By noon the whole house smelled like something you'd drive across 2 counties to eat. That was a full pot of soup, fed 6 people on $4. If that, the bone did the work. She just had to be patient. And patience, that's really the thread running through all of this, isn't it? These weren't shortcuts. These were long ways around that turned out to be the better road. Secret number 4, lard was her secret ingredient, and she wasn't ashamed of it before the word got complicated, before everyone decided fat was the enemy. Grandma kept a tin of lard next to the stove. Not for everything, but for pie crust. It was non-negotiable. You can use butter, you can use shortening, and your pie will be fine. But a pie crust made with lard has a flake to it that nothing else can quite replicate. She'd keep it cold, cut it in fast, handle the dough as little as possible, and that crust would shatter when you pressed a fork through it. There's a science to it, but she didn't call it science. She just called it how you do it. Secret number 5, she put a wooden spoon across the top of a boiling pot. If you've never seen this, let me paint the picture. Pot of water on the stove coming up to a full rolling boil, starting to climb toward the edge. Grandma reaches over without even looking, lays a wooden spoon flat across the top of the pot and walks away. That water settles right down. The spoon breaks the surface tension and pops the bubbles before they can foam over. No mess, no burner, no crisis. A trick so simple it seems like it shouldn't work, and yet it does every single time. She probably learned it from her mother, who learned it from hers. Secret number 6. Cast iron was her most prized possession, and she treated it like one. There are people who inherited grandmother's cast iron and don't use it because they're afraid of it, afraid of ruining the seasoning, afraid of rust, afraid of doing something wrong. Here's what Grandma actually did. She washed it by hand, dried it immediately on a low burner, rubbed a thin coat of oil over the inside with a rag, and put it away. That's it. She didn't soak it, didn't run it through the dishwasher, didn't scrub it with soap if she could help it. She treated it the way you'd treat a good pair of leather boots, maintained, not babied. That skillet cooked for 40 years, and it'll cook for 40 more if someone lets it. Secret number 7, she made her own vanilla extract. 2 or 3 vanilla beans, split down the middle, dropped into a small bottle of bourbon or vodka, lid on tight, tucked into a dark cabinet, left alone for at least 2 months. What came out was something no grocery store bottle could match, deep and dark and fragrant in a way that bloomed in whatever you added it to. She'd top off the bottle with more liquor as it emptied and just kept the beans going. Some of those bottles ran for years. The cost was almost nothing. The flavor was everything. Secret number 8. She kept a crock of bacon grease on the counter, right next to the stove, a small ceramic crock with a strainer built into the lid. Every time she cooked bacon, she'd pour the drippings through that strainer and let them collect. Then she used that grease to start almost everything: greens, cornbread, green beans, fried potatoes. It added a depth of flavor that vegetable oil simply doesn't have. And no, she wasn't worried about it sitting on the counter. A well-strained grease in a covered container keeps just fine for weeks. She knew this because every woman she'd ever learned from knew it too. Secret number 9, she salted her cast iron with coarse salt to clean stuck-on food. If something burned or stuck, and sometimes things stuck even in the best seasoned skillet, she didn't reach for soap and a scrubber. She poured a heavy handful of coarse kosher salt into the still warm pan, took a wadded-up paper towel or a clean rag and scrubbed in circles. The salt acted like a mild abrasive, pulling the stuck bits free without stripping the seasoning. Then she wiped it out, dried it on the burner, gave it a swipe of oil. Done. The pan looked better when she was finished than when she started. Secret number 10, she used coffee to deepen the flavor of beef. This one surprises people. A pot roast that had been braising for hours in the oven, if you looked at the liquid in that pot, sometimes you'd notice it was darker than it should have been. That was the coffee. A cup of strong black coffee added to the braising liquid gave the beef a richness that was impossible to pinpoint but impossible to miss. You couldn't taste the coffee, you just tasted something that made you want more. She never called it a trick. She called it how you make a roast taste right. Now, here's something I want you to hold on to for a moment because we're about halfway through these secrets and I haven't yet told you the one that changed how I think about everything in this list. We'll get there, but first, a few more that deserve their moment. Secret number 11, she never stored tomatoes in the refrigerator. A tomato that goes into the refrigerator comes out mealy and flat. The cold breaks down something in the cell walls and the flavor goes with it. Grandma kept her tomatoes on the windowsill or on the counter, stem side down to keep the moisture in, and she used them at room temperature. A tomato like that, sliced thick with a little salt and a drizzle of whatever oil she had, that was a side dish. That was a lunch. That was something worth sitting down for. Secret number 12. She used vinegar in almost everything, and you'd never know. Not a splash of it that you'd taste, just a small amount added at the end of cooking to bring up the brightness in a dish that was tasting flat. A teaspoon of apple cider vinegar in a pot of beans, a few drops of white vinegar in a cream sauce that needed to wake up. She understood that acid lifts flavor the way salt does, just differently. It wasn't a recipe rule, it was intuition, and she developed that intuition by tasting, adjusting, tasting again. Her whole life long. Secret number 13. She made stock from the chicken carcass every single time. After Sunday dinner, the picked-over carcass went into the biggest pot she had, cold water to cover. An onion cut in half, she didn't even peel it, said the skin gave the stock color. A couple of carrots, a celery stalk, a few peppercorns, some parsley if she had it. She brought it up slow and let it go for hours. What came out, she strained into jars and kept in the refrigerator for the week or the freezer for later. Every soup, every rice dish, every gravy she made that week started with that stock. Every Sunday dinner funded the whole week's cooking. That's not frugality, that's wisdom. Secret number 14. She put a bay leaf in the flour canister to keep the weevils out. This is one of those things that sounds like folk superstition until you look into it and find out it actually works. Bay leaves contain compounds that insects don't like. She'd put 1 or 2 dry bay leaves into her flour canister, her cornmeal, her dry pasta. Simple, costs almost nothing, completely effective. And if you think this sounds old-fashioned, you've probably also found weevils in your flour at least once and wished someone had told you sooner. Secret number 15. She dried herbs by hanging them upside down. Bundles of thyme and rosemary and sage, tied with kitchen string, hung upside down from the ceiling beam in the pantry or from a nail in the kitchen doorframe. When they were fully dry, paper crisp and fragrant, she'd strip the leaves into small jars, dried herbs she'd grown or bought fresh, preserved this way, lasted through winter and into the following spring. The jars lined a little shelf above the stove. Everything she needed right there, cost almost nothing after the first growing season. Secret number 16. She used a damp cloth under the cutting board. Not a special board, not a grip pad from the kitchen store, just a dishcloth, run under the tap and wrung out, laid flat on the counter, cutting board placed on top. It didn't move, didn't slide, didn't shift, didn't skitter across the counter when she was working fast with a big knife. A 30-second preparation that made every task safer and easier, the kind of thing you see once and never forget to do again. Secret number 17. She kept her knives sharp with a whetstone. Not a fancy electric sharpener, not a draw-through gadget, a simple whetstone, a little oil, and about 5 minutes of her time. A sharp knife, she said, was safer than a dull one, because a sharp knife went where you meant it to go. She sharpened her good knives every few weeks and honed them on a steel before each use. This is the kind of knife knowledge that used to be common and now costs people $150 to learn at a cooking class. She learned it before she was 20. Secret number 18. She added a pinch of baking soda to her beans, not for flavor, for texture and time. A small pinch of baking soda in the soaking water, or added during cooking, softens dried beans faster by acting on the tough outer skin. It can make the difference between beans that take 3 hours and beans that are ready in 2. She didn't explain the chemistry, she just said it helps, and she was right. And now you can look it up and find out exactly why she was right. Here it is. Secret number 19, and this is the one I promised you. She talked to her food while she cooked. I don't mean she had conversations with the pot roast, I mean she was present. She was paying attention in a way that's different from following a recipe. She'd taste as she went, adjust without measuring, check the color, smell the steam, listen to the sizzle change as moisture cooked off. Her attention was the ingredient nobody writes down. And here's what I believe, having cooked alongside women like her my whole life. Food made with that kind of presence tastes different. It tastes like someone made it. And that's why you can cook the exact same recipe as your grandmother, and it somehow doesn't come out the same. Because the missing ingredient isn't in the recipe. It's in the attention. It's in the love. If you'll let me use that word without embarrassment, that's what these secrets are really about. Not hacks, not shortcuts. Attention given to small things over long years until the small things became second nature. Secret number 20. She kept an onion in her pantry at all times, and she started almost every savory thing with it. Not because a recipe said so, because she knew that an onion cooked low and slow in a little fat becomes something else entirely. Sweet, dark at the edges, soft through and through. That foundation gave whatever came after it a depth that was almost impossible to build any other way. She started soup with it, started beans with it, started the gravy with it. The onion was never the point. The onion was what made the point possible. Secret number 21. She rested her meat before she cut it. 10 minutes on the board, covered loosely with foil. She didn't explain the juice redistribution. She just said it tastes better if you leave it alone for a few minutes. And when you cut into a roast that's been rested properly and the juices stay in the meat instead of running out across the board, you understand immediately what she meant and why it mattered. Secret number 22. She used cast iron for cornbread, always, and she preheated the pan. The skillet went into the oven while the oven came up to temperature, so that when the batter hit the hot iron, it started forming a crust immediately. That bottom crust, dark, a little crispy, pulling away from the sides, is the whole point of cast iron cornbread. Without the hot pan, you just get cornbread with it. You get something that makes people quiet for a moment when they take the first bite. That silence is the best compliment a kitchen can receive. Secret number 23. She put a dry cloth in the vegetable crisper drawer. A clean, dry dish towel or a folded paper towel laid in the bottom of the crisper drawer to absorb excess moisture. Because it's the moisture that makes greens go slimy and carrots go soft before their time. This one change, this one free 30-second change, can double how long your produce stays good. She didn't know about ethylene gas or relative humidity. She just knew the vegetables stayed better with a cloth in there, and she'd figured that out for herself. Probably in her 20s, and done it ever since. Secret number 24. She finished her pies with an egg wash and a little sugar. Not just any wash, she'd beat an egg with a tiny splash of cream, brush it over the top crust, then scatter a small handful of white sugar over it before it went into the oven. What came out was a crust with a deep amber color and a crackle of sweetness that contrasted perfectly with whatever was inside. It looked like it came from a bakery. It cost almost nothing extra. And if you've ever wondered why your grandmother's pie looked the way it did, polished, beautiful, like something worth saving room for, that's likely the reason. And that brings us to the last one. Secret number 25. She cooked for someone specific. Not for a dinner party, not for a recipe blog, not even for the whole family in a general sense. When she made her best pie, she was thinking about the one person who loved it most. When she made that pot of soup from the ham bone, she was thinking about getting it right, so whoever was coming to the table would feel it. The care was directed, the love was specific. And I think that specificity is what we taste when we eat food made by someone who really knows how to feed people. These 25 secrets aren't lost because people forgot them. They're lost because somewhere along the way we decided that convenience was better than craft, and that speed was better than patience, and that buying was easier than making. And in some ways, yes, it is easier. Nobody is going to pretend otherwise, but easier isn't the same as better. And your grandmother knew that. She knew it standing at that stove at 6 in the morning while everyone else was sleeping. She knew it the way you know something, not because someone told you, but because you've lived it long enough to feel it in your hands. The wooden spoon across the pot, the lard in the pie crust, the ham bone in the freezer wrapped in wax paper, the beans soaking overnight in a pot on the counter, the eggs washed into the pie crust just before it went in. She knew things we stopped knowing. And somewhere in you, if you're the kind of person who found their way to this video who remembers the way that kitchen smelled, somewhere in you, you know it too. That's not nothing. That's not a small thing. That's a whole way of living that said this matters. The food matters. The people at the table matter. The time it takes to do it right is not wasted time. It's the most important time there is. I hope something in these 25 secrets felt like home to you today. I hope one of them reminded you of somebody you loved. And if it did, I'd love for you to tell me about it down in the comments, because that's where the best stories always end up, and I read every single one. I'm Marie. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.